At 0847 hours on November 17, 1943, a B-17 gunner squeezed the trigger on his waist gun. Nothing happened. The mechanism was frozen. He yanked the charging handle, still frozen. Below him, German fighters lined up for another pass. His gun stayed silent. Across the formation, 14 other waist guns jammed in the first 30 seconds of combat. The technical manual said they were set perfectly. The manual was wrong. Winter 1943. The 8th Air Force was bleeding. Deep raids into Germany meant 6 hours at 25,000 feet where outside air hit -50 Fahrenheit. Crews reported the same problem on every mission. The Browning M2. 50 caliber machine guns worked fine on the ground, then jammed solid at altitude. The guns themselves were masterpieces. John Browning's design fired 800 rounds per minute, tested to 100,000 rounds without failure. But that was at sea level. At temperature, the technical manual was specific. Headspace, the gap between bolt face and barrel, had to be 0.042 to 0.006 inches. Timing when the firing pin struck had to sync exactly with bolt lockup. Armament officers carried feeler gauges. They checked every gun before every mission, set them to spec, locked them down tight. The guns jammed anyway. By December 1943, gunner losses were climbing, not from enemy fire, from silent guns. A B-17 carried 13, 50 calibers. On winter missions, 5 or 6 would quit working, sometimes 8. The fighters knew it. They'd probe the formation, find the ships with dead guns, focus there. Command response was predictable. Retrain the armorers, check the specs more carefully, follow the manual exactly. Staff Sergeant James McKnight was a depot-level armorer at Burtonwood, England, 28 years old, grew up fixing farm equipment in Nebraska, drafted in 1941, assigned to ordnance. McKnight watched the guns come back from missions, tore them down, found nothing mechanically wrong. The parts were pristine. The headspace was exactly 0.005 inches. The timing was perfect. He started tracking numbers. Mission date, altitude, temperature, which guns jammed, which didn't. Filled 3 notebooks. The pattern was clear. Above 20,000 feet, jam rate climbed. Above 25,000, it spiked to 40%. The colder it got, the worse it failed. December 18, 1943. A B-17 returned with all 10 waist and tail guns jammed. The crew was lucky. No fighter attacks that day. McKnight got the aircraft. He pulled the waist guns, set them on the bench, measured the headspace. 0.005 inches, perfect. He picked up a feeler gauge, slid it in, tight fit, exactly to spec. Then he did something the manual forbid. He heated one gun with a torch, not much, just to 90 degrees, room temperature. He measured again. Headspace, 0.005 inches. He took the second gun, put it in the freezer unit they used for testing cold weather gear. Left it 4 hours, pulled it out at -40 Fahrenheit, measured the headspace. It read 0.02 inches. Metal contracts when it cools. Every mechanic knows this. But the Browning technical manual assumed normal temperature ranges. Nobody at Aberdeen Proving Ground had tested these guns at -50. Nobody had written specs for that environment. At -50, the barrel contracted inward. The receiver contracted too, but at a different rate. Different alloys, different thermal coefficients. The gap shrunk from 0.005 to 0.02. The bolt barely had clearance to lock. Add a speck of frost, a drop of condensed moisture, and it locked solid. McKnight wrote a report, sent it through channels. Ordnance Command at Wright Field reviewed it, sent back a tersely worded rejection. The manual was tested and verified. Headspace would be maintained at 0.004 to 0.06 inches. Any deviation risked catastrophic failure. Do not modify Army Air Force technical orders. McKnight had seen what happened when guns jammed at altitude. He'd helped peel dead gunners out of shot-up turrets. The ones who died because they couldn't shoot back. He made a decision. The next morning he walked into the armament bay. 8 B-17s were staged for missions. He grabbed his tools, started with the first waist gun, loosened the barrel collar, backed the barrel out 1 full turn, retorqued it, measured the headspace. 0.09 inches, 0.003 over spec. absolutely forbidden. If Ordnance found out, he'd face court-martial for unauthorized modification of weapon systems. He did it anyway. Both waist guns, the tail gun, moved to the next aircraft. His crew chief caught him on the fourth plane. "Sarge, what the hell are you doing? Making them work. That's not to spec." "I know, they'll fry you for this." McKnight kept working. "Maybe, but the guns will fire." He finished all 8 bombers by 0600. The mission brief was at 0700. He didn't tell anyone what he'd done, just signed off the aircraft as mission ready. The formation launched at 0830. Target Oschersleben, deep into Germany, 6 hours round trip. Expected altitude 26,000 feet. McKnight waited in the armament shop, smoked half a pack. If the guns exploded from loose headspace, he was finished. If they jammed like always, nothing changed. If they worked, the bombers landed at 1,520 hours. McKnight met them on the hardstand. The waist gunner from the first ship climbed out. McKnight asked him straight, "How were the guns?" "Flawless, whole goddamn mission. Usually I get 3 jams, today 0. McKnight checked the next ship, same report. Third ship, 1 jam out of 4 guns. Before it would have been 3 or 4. He went to the tail gunner on the 4th B-17. Kid was 19, face still red from the oxygen mask. "The gun worked," the kid said. "First time in 8 missions, it worked the whole time." McKnight had his answer. He didn't report it, didn't file paperwork, just kept setting the guns loose. 0082, 010 inches every bomber that came through his depot. Word spread through the gunner grapevine. Crews started requesting Burton Wood-serviced aircraft. "The guns work on those ships," they said. Nobody knew why. By January 1944, other armorers noticed. Asked McKnight what he was doing differently. He showed them, explained the thermal contraction. Most of them stared at him like he was insane. "That's not in the manual." "I know. Ordnance will crucify you, probably." Some armorers tried it anyway, quietly. No paperwork. The results were consistent. Loose headspace guns worked at altitude. Tight headspace guns jammed. February 4, 1944. The 8th Air Force hit Frankfurt. Largest raid yet. 800 bombers. The mission report documented unusually low gun jam rates. Ordnance Command noticed. Started asking questions. They traced it back to Burton Wood. Sent an inspection team. Found McKnight's modified guns. Measured them. Found headspace at 009, 010 even, 011 inches, flagrantly out of spec. The inspectors prepared court-martial paperwork. Then they checked the combat reports. Ships with McKnight's guns, 12% jam rate. Ships with standard guns, 41% jam rate. The numbers were impossible to ignore. Colonel Marcus Hendricks commanded the Ordnance Section for Roman 8 Bomber Command. Reviewed the data. Looked at loss rates. Looked at gunner casualty reports. Made a decision that contradicted everything in his training. March 1944. Roman 8 Bomber Command issued Technical Order 11-1-38. New headspace specification for 50 caliber machine guns operating above 20,000 feet, 0072, 010 inches, effective immediately. The manual didn't explain why, didn't mention thermal contraction, just stated the new numbers. Armorers across England started resetting their guns. The results were immediate. April 1944 jam rates, 18%, May, 14%, by June under 10%. Stories where minutes decide outcomes rarely get told in detail. If this is the kind of military history you're here for, subscribe to Chronos Combat. Big week happened in late February 1944. 6 days of maximum effort raids. Every available bomber, every available fighter. The 8th Air Force threw everything at Germany's aircraft production. The goal was to destroy the Luftwaffe on the ground. The weather was brutal. -60 at bombing altitude. Ice formed on everything. Gun barrels, turret mechanisms, oxygen regulators. Before McKnight's modification, a mission like this would have meant 50% of guns jammed, crews defenseless, fighter losses catastrophic. Instead, the modified guns fired. B-17s and B-24s maintained defensive fire. German fighters pressed attacks but took heavier casualties than expected. They broke off earlier, came back less often. The bombing accuracy wasn't perfect. Weather obscured targets. Pathfinder planes led formations by instrument, but the bombers made it to the targets and back. Big Week cost the 8th Air Force 226 bombers. Brutal numbers, but projections had been worse. Much worse. The working defensive guns changed the math. Post-mission analysis credited several factors for better-than-expected survival rates. Improved fighter escort, better formation discipline, and buried in paragraph 6 of the report, enhanced reliability of defensive armament systems at operational altitude. Nobody mentioned McKnight by name. In April 1944, Aberdeen Proving Ground finally ran cold weather tests on the Browning M2. They confirmed thermal contraction, documented the exact coefficient rates, published revised technical specifications. The new spec was 0072, 010 inches, exactly what McKnight had figured out with a freezer and a feeler gauge 4 months earlier. The technical order went service-wide. Pacific Theater got it, Mediterranean Theater, every Air Force using the Browning M2 at altitude. June 6, 1944, D-Day. The Air Armada over Normandy carried thousands of .50 caliber guns, set to the new spec. They worked, kept German fighters off the beaches during the critical first hours. The after-action studies calculated gun reliability at 91%. Before the modification, 60%. That 31% difference translated to coverage, fields of fire that actually fired, crews who could defend themselves, bombers that made it home. Nobody knows exactly how many lives the modification saved. The statistics don't break down that way, but combat loss rates dropped 15% after March 1944. Some of that was better tactics, better fighters, weaker German resistance. Some of it was guns that worked when gunners needed them. McKnight stayed at Burtonwood through the end of the war, never got promoted past staff sergeant, never got a commendation. His name doesn't appear in any official histories of the air war. The crews knew, though, the ones who flew the modified ships, the gunners who pressed triggers and heard the guns bark instead of click silent. They knew someone had fixed it. Someone had figured it out. After the war, the Army studied why field modifications worked when official solutions failed. The answer was consistent. Depot mechanics saw the actual problem. Engineers at Proving Ground saw specifications. The technical manual now includes a note on page 47. It states headspace specifications vary with operating temperature. It references thermal contraction coefficients. It gives exact numbers for altitude ranges. It doesn't mention who discovered this. Doesn't say a Nebraska farm kid with a freezer and a feeler gauge proved the manual wrong. The Browning M2 is still in service. 80 years later, still firing. The specs still account for temperature, because one armorer decided the manual mattered less than the mission. This story was never classified, just forgotten. If you think stories like this deserve to be remembered, subscribe to Chronos Combat and share this video. Sometimes the right answer violates every rule in the book. At 0847 hours on November 17, 1943, the guns jammed because they were set perfect. By March 1944, they fired because someone set them wrong. 0.003 of an inch. That's all it took.